Story 1, because it is easier to ignore what you cannot see, and there is still the idea that you are weak if you struggle mentally. Story 2, because people who do not understand will use it against you. They may label you as weak or unstable, but you are neither of those things. Story 3, it is worth noting that we take mental health more seriously now than we ever have. In the past, we referred to post-traumatic stress disorder as shell shock. Women were once diagnosed with having a crazy uterus, referred to as hysteria. People with borderline personality disorder or attention deficit/hyperactivity disorder were often subjected to lobotomies. Historically, individuals were even burned at the stake due to their mental health issues. As recently as the 1990s, the treatment for schizophrenia typically involved giving a combination of medications and hoping for a positive outcome. Otherwise, individuals were often institutionalized for life. While we should strive for continual improvement, it is important to recognize the significant progress that has been made. Diagnostic capabilities are likely to improve, allowing for more accurate identification of mental health conditions. Story 4, because most people do not have the choice to take it seriously. If you do not work, you do not pay your rent, utilities, groceries, and so on. You have to push through because you have no other choice. Story 5, because it takes empathy, understanding, and compassion, 3 major things that this world is losing or has already lost. Story 6, it requires effort and financial investment to improve, but many people are unwilling or unable to invest in themselves. Mental health issues do not appear in blood tests, making them easier to dismiss yet harder to diagnose. Admitting that something is wrong necessitates taking responsibility for one's life, and many prefer to act as if they are victims. Story 7, I don't think more than half of the people know what mental health looks like, and if they do, they don't care. It becomes more complex because individuals with significant mental health issues can also be high-functioning, charming, and attractive in ways that make others overlook their illness. Story 8, because despite all the progress that has been made, 75% of society still believes depression and anxiety can be overcome by simply enduring it. Story 9, this is from a person who was professionally diagnosed with bipolar disorder and depression. He told me that he knew he had some problems, but he couldn't accept that he was mentally ill. Some individuals are actually in denial about their mental health issues. Story 10, access to care is improving with advancements in technology. Some individuals have struggled to find quality care in the past. It can still be financially burdensome for many, as it is often not covered by health insurance. Story 11, because there is only so much you can do. We live in a world where some aspects of mental health are inevitable for many people, such as poverty, war, isolation, social norms, physical and emotional limits, and class immobility. Staying aware of this reality can be soul-crushing. It's easier to ignore what feels uncontrollable, leading us to overlook significant portions of our struggles. In doing so, we can lose ourselves in dreams, vices, and illusions as coping mechanisms, often ignoring how these can slowly harm us. It can be better for many of us, but to believe it can be so, even when current evidence suggests otherwise. To maintain that belief indefinitely, while operating within the illusions of society and progress, knowing they are not entirely real. That's a significant challenge that many of us find difficult to manage. Story 12. People do not want to be seen as weak, and anyone who speaks out is labeled as an attention seeker. So many choose to pretend these issues do not exist. Story 13. Because you cannot see mental health issues, there is a stigma associated with asking for help regarding problems that are not visible. Story 14. It's expensive. I've tried therapy and antidepressants. It turns out I would rather be depressed than listen to unqualified professionals and take medication. My mother was a clinical psychologist, so I feel I know more than the therapists I visited. Story 15. Because people who lack understanding believe that what occurs in someone else's mind isn't real. Story 16. It is difficult to admit you have a problem and need to change, especially when it relates to your thoughts and feelings. With no instant fix, people often just cope or believe they can handle it on their own. Story 17. I believe it's a combination of many conditions being undiagnosed, which leads those affected to think, everyone feels that way, get over it. Additionally, Other conditions have received a lot of negative and inaccurate attention, causing misunderstandings. As a result, people who truly have these conditions are often seen as exaggerating. For example, many parents of autistic children also exhibit traits of autism. However, since they were never diagnosed, they believe that's just how life is, thinking anyone who cannot cope is lazy. Conversely, many people think they understand what obsessive-compulsive disorder or bipolar disorder is, but they are often familiar only with a very simplified version. When they encounter someone with obsessive-compulsive disorder, they may expect, they just like to clean, and react poorly to any actual symptoms. Story 18. It is invisible. Additionally, many people do not have the financial resources or family support to cope with it. Story 19. Because if you haven't had issues with it personally, it's nearly impossible to understand. Additionally, I believe its rise in awareness has led many people to use it to justify their behavior and mood illegitimately. I have depression and anxiety. Nowadays, I'll only discuss it with people who have been through similar experiences. How would anyone know how to help you navigate a place they've never been? Unless they're a professional, of course. Story 20. In my experience, people who haven't suffered mental illness generally do not understand, often do not want to understand, and prefer not to be around individuals who are struggling. This makes the illness even more difficult for me, drowning in loneliness and lack of support. Story 21. Many of us were raised with the belief that if you are experiencing mental health issues, you will be confined. There has also been widespread ignorance surrounding mental health. Story 22. It can evoke feelings of shame. If a child tells a parent they have a mental illness, the parent may feel accused of being a bad parent. Similarly, if someone is informed that they have a mental illness, it can also trigger shame, embarrassment, and denial. Story 23. Mental health often gets ignored because it is invisible, and society still sees it as a sign of weakness. I lost a friend who struggled silently for years because he feared judgment until it was too late. That moment changed everything. I still regret not asking him more often how he was really doing. Break the silence and check in on each other. It can save lives. Story 24. I have always believed we should approach mental health in the same way we approach physical health. We go to the gym to take care of our physical well-being, but we do not seek help from a therapist or others for our mental health. Story 25. I think it's part of a larger problem where people just don't care about others in general. If we cared about others, the compassion would be obvious, and the stigmas wouldn't be so pervasive. Story 26. The same reason people don't take invisible disabilities seriously is that they can't see them, so in their minds, they are not real. It reflects a lack of empathy, I suppose. Story 27. Because you cannot see it. Out of sight, out of mind. Then when they do see it, they are shocked you were serious. Story 28. Because someone being sick is inconvenient. If a person is physically ill, you can't really deny it. They would go to work if they could, and if it's a headache, they often still do. But mental health? Many people claim it isn't real and force others to go to work, without allowing them to complain, etc. Story 29. Because it is invisible and no one else lives inside your mind except for you, no one knows how hard it is. Additionally, sometimes people do not care. Story 30. Because there is not much an average person can do. Mental health is extremely difficult to diagnose and treat, even for professionals in the field. Story 31. They are afraid of being judged and perceived as weak, especially men. One time, I opened up to my ex about feeling mentally exhausted. She ended up telling me, "You're a man. You're supposed to be strong all the time." I thought, I'm human too. Now, I keep to myself and avoid opening up. It does eat away at you at times. I won't lie. Story 32. Ego can lead individuals to believe they are above seeking professional help and addressing emotional illiteracy, often resulting in significant problems before any changes are made. Story 33. Because life outside our own needs to keep moving. When you talk to anyone about mental health, they usually do not know what to say or do and seem to lack the desire to engage. Story 34. At least in my own life, it carries a heavy stigma. I know better than to talk about when I'm feeling down with the men I work with, They still don't know I've been single since August. I didn't even mention that I went to therapy to my closest friends until a discussion one night revealed that everyone else either also had therapy or is still going. Story 35. Most of my elders do not agree with or believe in therapy or counseling. My family would disown me if I told them about my diagnosis. Story 36. Because there are a few bad individuals who use mental health as an excuse for poor behavior when they truly have nothing wrong, and these few individuals somehow represent the entire group. Story 37. It's like a migraine. People who don't experience them or love someone who does think you just need to take some aspirin like they do. Those without mental health issues can't understand why we don't just toughen up, power through, or get over it like they do. Story 38. I never served in the military, but I have 15 years of post-traumatic stress disorder. When I tried to speak to the women in my class about being groomed and molested, they dismissed it as not that bad. I was 18, and it took until I was 32 to deal with it. It has been a difficult journey. Story 39. It is not visible or tangible. It's not like you have a gauge on the side of your head displaying your brain chemical levels or a diagram showing your damaged or inherent brain structure. Another reason is that we know so little. We cannot explain why. Yes, you have bipolar 2 disorder. Yes, this anti-seizure medication works. We think these factors might be the source, but honestly, we do not know for sure. People hear that and think it is a myth because humans want an explanation. This desire for understanding is why I was expelled from catechism in 4th grade. For some, it is hard to believe that behaviors can be biological and that it is impossible to differentiate between chosen behaviors and pathological ones. The success of telling someone to act right in the past leads many to believe it should work for everyone. How could it not, right? That experience, along with subsequent beliefs and numerous other variables, snowballs into what we observe today. Another significant factor is culture. I come from a family of emergency responders, including my parents and a grandparent, and I am a paramedic myself. The shove-it-down culture was real during my upbringing. Only in the past 5 to 6 years, as the conversation regarding mental health in society has evolved, have they begun to talk about their feelings and experiences, both positive and negative. They belong to the baby boomer generation and were also paramedics, so they were raised in a culture that expected them to maintain a facade of emotional strength, believing that negative emotions should not be displayed in front of others while insisting on pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. Many people still think this way because they were raised by parents who did not evolve or change their mindset. It is what they know. That is a brief overview of my thoughts on this topic. Mental health is something I am very passionate about, both as a patient and as a healthcare provider. Story 40. When I tried to get therapy, the therapist did not show up for our first session. I wish I was making this up. This was after it took 2 years to convince myself that therapy would actually help me, and after 6 months of researching to find the right therapist. It is difficult to take mental health seriously when the therapist does not. Story 41. Someone makes up false opinions about life and uses them to make important decisions that do not work out. Someone complains about reality and life for attention. People respond by saying, "You made a bad decision. What did you expect? You also lie, and how do you expect us to believe the rest of what you tell us about your bad situation?" Someone replies, "Oh my, you were hateful. This is hurting my mental health." People say, "We just ask you not to lie, but you have based your identity on a lie you want to believe in. What you're asking for is impossible, even if people play along." Someone responds, "Oh my, you're hurting me." People conclude, "We won't take you seriously. All we did was point out the obvious. Please have some common sense and make better decisions." Sometimes it goes like that. Story 42. People often pretend that something doesn't exist if it isn't affecting them directly. Additionally, mental health and depression are not discussed enough, leading to significant stigma. This can make individuals afraid to speak about these issues. However, throughout my life, I will emphasize the importance of acknowledging that not everyone is okay. Story 43. It is easier for people to ignore issues than to discuss hard truths and the real problems faced by millions. As someone who struggles with depression daily, I wish people would stop viewing mental health as taboo and make an effort to be more understanding. Story 44. I take it very seriously. I experience too many breakdowns and risk doing something I promised my closest loved ones, as well as myself, I wouldn't do. It's hard enough for people who deal with it firsthand, let alone for those who don't know how to help when you're in a crisis. It's easy to overlook it and sweep it under the rug. Story 45. If I'm going to be a bit nicer to people than simply avoiding them, there are a lot more mental health difficulties now than before. Fortunately, more people are functioning as normal adults. Otherwise, society would fall apart. What do I mean by normal? These are people who intuitively figured out how to live stable lives without needing professional guidance. What you can see and recognize easily is mostly what you have personally experienced. If you have never felt the burnout of depression and how heavy that can feel, how are you supposed to process or notice it? Some young people can't manage this at all. Incomprehensible. I could do that and more. I just used my solutions. Now for a somewhat dumb example. The options available to you will be greatly determined by your lived experience and skills. If I walk into a dead end on my way somewhere and see no way forward, I would be unable to progress and have to turn back. However, if I had parkour skills, I might approach the situation differently. I would be able to see how I could potentially vault over the obstacle, which otherwise wouldn't be a possibility. In a roundabout way, I'm not entirely sure a lot of people are equipped to really notice mental health as a problem. Many people go unnoticed this way, and that is sad in its own way. However, one could argue whether it is really everyone else's responsibility to be overly tolerant towards your mental health. I don't have a definitive answer to that, but it's interesting to ponder these questions at times. In summary, most people haven't experienced or resolved depression in their lives, so they aren't equipped to notice or help. Story 46. Some people do not even understand the state of their own mental health to know how to take it seriously. Imagine going your whole life thinking that what you have been experiencing is normal, only to find out one day that it is not. For example, living with depression can mean having days when we feel totally fine. We might have days where we feel hopeful and inspired, only to wake up the next day feeling like something is missing, or that something is off. Over the following weeks, we may find our mood has dipped lower and lower until we are back in that place again. Hopeless, alone, irritable, and miserable. One day we wake up after days or weeks, sometimes even months, of being in that dark place. That seemed normal to us, and we completely forgot during that time of being low that being normal isn't what it is at all. Being ourselves is what is normal, only until we notice ourselves slipping back into the dark. When we have mental health issues, they can creep up on us. We often do not know how to address them while we are living in that fog. For those experiencing such challenges, it can be very difficult to take it seriously because they are the ones living it day to day. Story 47. Because they don't realize its effect on people or they think the worst. I am diagnosed with ultradian bipolar type 2. When others hear that I have bipolar disorder, they often react negatively, thinking the worst. Story 48. You cannot see mental health struggles, at least not like you can see other illnesses such as cancer. Mental health challenges manifest in various ways, such as a messy home or unwashed dishes. They can range from delayed bills to the extreme of a hoarder's house. These struggles may also present as overeating or undereating, with overeating often perceived by others as a control and moral issue. If you are overweight, it may be assumed that you do not respect yourself or your health. Furthermore, these challenges can be hidden in issues like alcoholism or drug addiction, which can be easy to conceal. Mental health struggles are complex and require multifaceted solutions. Often, medication and therapy alone aren't sufficient. Sometimes, individuals may need to explore different therapists or medications over a long period. You may even require a whole team of specialists if your struggles include disordered eating, alcoholism, or other coping mechanisms. This could involve working with a nutritionist and a doctor to monitor your weight, in addition to medication. All of this comes with financial demands. During my own struggles, I was informed that it might take 2 to 3 times the duration of my mental health challenges to overcome them and to change my thinking patterns. Imagine being someone who has faced difficulties for years and being told that it may take 2 to 3 times longer to just feel normal like those around you. The financial burden can be overwhelming. At times, it seems easier to give up, and the lack of support, coupled with the perception that mental health struggles are not real, makes it even harder. Story 49. Mental health is treated like an inconvenience rather than a genuine issue. People do not realize how serious it is until they experience it firsthand. Story 50. With men, discussing this topic is often avoided because it is perceived as a weakness. Many believe it is not a serious health condition and that it can be resolved on your own by changing your attitude. Story 51. It is stigmatized. Individuals who cannot control their emotions are perceived as weak. There is still a limited understanding of how mental health functions. Story 52. It's because it's an invisible disability. Yes, some mental issues are noticeable in how individuals act or move, but most of the time that isn't the case. It's hidden and affects social interactions. Since we are social creatures, this often leads to feelings of being an outcast. We are definitely making progress as we move forward. For instance, consider the research on autism, eating disorders, and the varying effects of sleep on individuals. Just find a disorder that interests you and observe the advancements we have made recently. However, we are also experiencing regression depending on where you are in the world. Many older individuals view these issues negatively, while many younger people consider them normal, as more individuals are starting to receive diagnoses without stereotypes interfering too much. Story 53. Some people believe that being unable to function in society indicates an issue with society rather than with the individual. Story 54. Because it only recently became something we can diagnose and attempt to treat, relative to societal advancement, the world is still stuck in the past. Many outlets are either too expensive, scams, or unhelpful. There are plenty of resources that assist people in helping themselves, but not everyone is capable of that, and many societies do not prioritize mental well-being enough. Our culture is still focused on a grind mentality. Story 55. For me personally, I have noticed a few reasons. In the workplace, having a healthy work-life balance, livable wages, and good benefits are all quite costly. It's also hard to run a business if I call out for mental health struggles. Ironically enough, people often call out sick when that happens anyway. As such, the problem is shifted onto the worker. I've never had an insurance provider take mental health seriously. I have to battle to get much of any mental health-related treatment covered. My insurance will treat a broken arm with no questions asked, but it won't pay for a single one of my therapy visits, which are quite expensive. It paid for me to see a psychiatrist but refuses to cover my $12 antidepressants because I use my local pharmacy and not their partnered one far away from my house. As a man, it's not taken seriously due to generations of poor emotional development and ideas of toxic masculinity. My dad could show anger, which is a fine masculine emotion, but showing sadness or depression was not acceptable. Many men have entirely stunted ideas of human emotional expression, and as a result, most bottle it up until they can't anymore. There are several language barriers when discussing mental health. Talking about depression can be confusing because it is both a common temporary emotional state and a diagnosable mental illness that is persistent. It gets confused when talking about anxiety, depression, obsessive-compulsive disorder, and mania, as one party may view it as temporary rather than the disordered variety. Culturally, mental illness is seen as a personal failing, leading to immense shame when experiencing a mental health problem. As a man in therapy, I've encountered relatives who unjokingly state that someone is weak for seeking help or couldn't handle their father's suicide, so they have to go to therapy. My mother would mock my dad for taking medication during their failing marriage. Many view it as weakness. The culture is such that when someone tells you they are suicidal, you refer them to a hotline and forget about it. If they aren't doing what they need to be well, such as calling the hotline, attending therapy, taking medication, sleeping enough, eating, or exercising, it is seen as the cause of their mental health struggles rather than the symptoms. Typically, those who are mentally unwell do not seek out the things that would help them improve. These are just the first few that come to mind, but yes, the social stigma regarding mental illness is real and ensures that those experiencing it will have significantly worse outcomes. Story 56. It would require us to acknowledge as a society that many of the things we take for granted about how we live our lives may actually be detrimental to our well-being. Addressing these issues would not necessarily generate shareholder value. Protestant work ethic concerns. Story 57. I am trying to take it more seriously. I have been practicing stoicism and learning to differentiate between the things I can control and those I cannot control. Story 58. What is the difference between being unmotivated and being depressed? What is the difference between spending too much time on something and having an addiction? What if you just don't like certain things? I mention these from experience. It is easy to think things are normal and slip from a minor problem to a real one. Story 59. I don't think it's a matter of ignoring it. I believe it's been so normalized that we don't really pay attention anymore. Story 60. Some people have never experienced it themselves, or at least through a friend or relative. For some, it's hard to understand what it's like to have a panic attack, feeling as though the lights are on but no one is home. Others do not understand that it is possible to be depressed, bedridden, or suicidal without any obvious reason. Story 61. I think society has a significant divide that revolves around proximity. If your sibling has bipolar disorder or schizophrenia, then mental health becomes a priority in your household. It is an ongoing issue every day. If you have addicts in your family, you care. As time goes on and you get older, you may wish to detach yourself, but you still care. These experiences shape your views on society and inform your attitude toward politics. However, if you do not have these experiences, it can feel like a blank void. If it doesn't impact you, it can seem as real as unicorns or werewolves, just homeless individuals who appear to be non-playable characters, and it becomes hard to imagine that they could be your uncle or brother. Story 62. People fear what they do not understand. Many individuals do not take the time to educate themselves. Although I believe the situation is improving in terms of education, many people remain in denial and express their opinions very vocally. Story 63. Mental health services are often viewed with skepticism, and some people believe that psychologists and psychiatrists are not trustworthy. It is important to critically examine these fields and consider how to protect yourself from potential exploitation. Story 64. Because if we did, we would have to change. The wealthy and powerful would be slightly less so to make those changes happen. Story 65. There is a stigma that you are crazy or somehow permanently affected if you seek professional help for your struggles. This perception does not have to be true, but it makes people more reluctant to seek assistance or take care of their mental health. Story 66. As mentioned, it is hard to see physically. It is a younger science and always changing. Most people do not understand the need for it until they experience a situation that requires addressing their mental health, and even then, they may not realize it. Care is not usually free, so people often do not address mental health until all their other needs are met. The stigma exists because historically few people have sought help for their mental health, leading to a lack of understanding. I had to see someone as a child due to a fear of lightning. As a result, I have been more open-minded about it as an adult. Story 67. Who says they take their physical health any more seriously? The obesity rate in the United States is 40%. Story 68. Some groups have trivialized mental health by using it as an excuse for poor behavior. As a result, people stop taking it seriously, and those with genuine mental health issues suffer. Story 69. Because people operate under the illusion of free will, they think they can just decide to do whatever they want regardless of obstacles. Story 70. I can only really speak on men, specifically men over 30. We were generally told not to ask for help because that is perceived as weak and fragile, among other outdated notions. Personally, I have an 11-year-old son. I have had him in therapy for years, so he has someone to talk to who is not me or my wife and whom he can trust. I got him into therapy because he was always quiet and shy. He is a gifted child, not at all lacking intelligence, just someone who wouldn't speak up for himself. Generally, he was quiet. Therapy has definitely helped his confidence and dramatically improved it. He now speaks his mind, for better or worse. And just to vent for a moment, people who use others as sounding boards need to seek therapy themselves. Seriously, don't treat others that way. No one appreciates it, and you are not going to listen to anything we say anyway. If you want to hear yourself talk, go yell into a pillow or hire someone to listen to you. Story 71. For the same reason, I read your question in the SpongeBob meme voice, though it did give me a chuckle. Story 72. Life is hard. Deal with your challenges and move forward. Sitting around and dwelling on insignificant matters will not solve anything. Story 73. My observation is that some blame could be placed on the emphasis many people place on the existence of mental health problems, including disorders, while not giving enough attention to the fact that individuals are still responsible for their actions. I may have certain problems where my actions are a symptom of my mental health, but I am still responsible for those actions and how I handle them afterward. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.